Tamas is one of the three mind types, or three states of the mind, in Ayurveda. And it's what we're talking about today. My name is John Immel. This is what I look like. So Tamas is a concept from Vedic spirituality, actually in Sankhya philosophy, and it's used in several places in the Ayurvedic texts, especially the sections on mental health. And it's considered to be one of the three states of the mind, or the three mind types. Just like your body has a body type, your mind has a mind type. And there's three of them in Vedic spirituality, called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And those three are collectively called the Mahagunas. Sattva is peaceful, clear, balanced, and steady, and it's considered to be the preferred mental type in Sankhya. Rajas is considered to be an inferior mental type characterized by passion, desire, and action. And Tamas is considered to be the worst mental type in Sankhya, characterized by inertia, dullness, sleep, and darkness. And here you see that Sankhya praises awareness and consciousness. Sankhya is all about consciousness, and that's why it rates them into these three categories. And we're going to talk a little bit about another way to look at that. But let's first look at the orthodox view of Tamas from the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a famous spiritual text from India, part of the Mahabharata. And it is, the word tamas literally means darkness. It is the opposite of the light of consciousness. As I mentioned in Vedic spirituality, consciousness is the goal. So this word tamas comes from the same as the Latin word for blindness, temere. And so the Vedic text described tamas as a force of concealment, or being shrouded in darkness. And in another verse it says that tamasic knowledge sees one small part and mistakes it for the whole. Many Ayurvedic teachers do not follow this orthodox view, however, that tamas is bad. They have an alternative viewpoint, that a person needs to have a balance of sattva, rajas, and tamas in order to function. And part of this is because all of reality is seen to be coming from tamas in the Sankhya model. And so Ayurveda, being a system of medicine that supports the body, the reality of the body, it's a little more supportive of tamas in general. So this alternative viewpoint is that all three of the Mahagunas are necessary, natural, and equally virtuous when balanced, but harmful when imbalanced. The example there is that the enthusiasm, movement, and action of Rajas gets you up in the morning. Sattva helps you perform daily activities with focus and clarity, and tamas allows you to go to sleep at night and relax. So this alternative viewpoint of tamas is a heterodox viewpoint, but it's the one we're going to teach, and I think it's the one that's most useful in the context of Ayurveda. So balanced tamas. What is tamas good for? Tamas is good for remaining calm and stable, following a consistent routine, and sleeping well. Tamasic people have a sense of stability, ease, and comfort in their lives. They're secure financially and have a comfortable home, and they're self-assured. This is, again, balanced tamas. They're not wondering what they should do next, and they don't get stuck in their head. They're rooted in their community. They're oriented towards more home life. They may be a nurturing caregiver. They're not traveling frequently or moving from country to country. They, in general, have less stress and strain. They're not struggling to achieve notoriety or fame, and they're calm and even-keeled. They don't overreact in stressful situations and maintain composure. In comparison to Chinese medicine, tamas is the yin part, not the yang part. Tamas is restorative and inward in nature. The other two mahagunas, sattva and rajas, are both yang in nature. Sattva is clear and universal, whereas rajas is active and expressive. And those are qualities are both considered to be yang in Chinese medicine. One way to look at tamas is as soulful as opposed to spiritual. And I'm using a special definition of soulful here. If you look up the word soulful in Wikipedia, it'll talk about something as being almost mournful quality or very deep feeling. And what I'm using here is the deep feeling, but not the mournful part. And in Care of the Soul, Jungian psychotherapist Thomas More compares the difference between spiritual and soulful. And I think that definition is very useful. Soulfulness orients a person towards deep feelings and the physical, and the personal. It orients a person towards being rooted and nurturing the familiar. They might even have a love, if you say in the positive way, or a bias towards one's family or a locality or roots. So I think of soulfulness as loving that, little holler that you come from in the mountains. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in western North Carolina, which is mountainous, and people are always talking about that holler that they grew up in. And a holler just means a little valley, a little tiny mountain valley. So soulfulness is oriented towards deep feelings. Now, sattva is more oriented towards universal truths and objectivity, transcendence. And I think of that as sometimes, or in this context, I'm describing spiritual as a contrast to soulfulness as being that more transcendent quality. And the reason why I'm introducing this word soulful is to give people who are naturally tamasic in nature a vision for how they can be a spiritual, or a vision for how their spiritual awareness, which is more soulful and less transcendent, less abstract. When I was traveling in Italy, I noticed that people from every village considered their village to be the best village in all of Italy. And I think that really expressed the soulfulness of balanced tamas, that loving your peaceful, sleepy little town. What about excess tamas? Now, this is tamas out of balance. Awareness is the highest state in Sankhya. Therefore, in the Sankhya worldview, the lack of awareness in tamas is seen as a destructive force, leading to chaos, decay, and disintegration. So this is more the orthodox view of tamas. Like, what does the Vedic spirituality text say about tamas? They call it chaos, decay, and disintegration. Think of people fighting due to a misunderstanding. That would easily be solved with better communication. Right? And we've all had this even in our personal lives, where we're fighting, and then we realized it was totally due to a misunderstanding. That would be an example of the negative aspect of tamas. So tamasic people may struggle in some of these areas with not maintaining a high standard of hygiene, with feeling inertia or feeling stuck and sloth, general heaviness, a tendency to gain weight, and lacking motivation and ambition, slow to make necessary changes, stubborn and stuck in their ways and unwilling to make a change for their own benefit. They can be lethargic like a couch potato, unable to get out of bed in the morning. They can be flabby and lack muscle tone and be prone to depression, or be withdrawn and avoid social interaction. They can have brain fog, fatigue, and lethargy, or be exhausted by thinking. As a Pitta person, I'm like never exhausted by more thinking. But it happens to be all the time that I'm talking to someone and they get tired of thinking before I do, right? And that's, tamasic people get exhausted thinking and concentrating. They might feel like they're their mind is cloudy. Tamasic people can't see the can't see beyond their desires. So they can be, they can be lead to addictive behaviors. Like if something gives them pleasure, it doesn't matter whether it hurts them. They may follow their instincts and do it anyway. Rebecca, one of our teachers, says that before she started studying Ayurveda, she had excess tamas. Low energy, inability to concentrate and focus, and a lack of awareness, etc. So when she found Ayurveda and she began to understand these concepts of sattva, rajas, and tamas, she implemented diet and lifestyle habits to lift herself out of the fog and heaviness of tamas. And the result was clearer thinking, more motivation, more energy, and more enthusiasm. So people who struggle to get out of bed, eats a lot of processed food and leftovers, watching hours of TV each day, no exercise. That's example of tamas. And the tamasic clients generally need the most coaching and prodding and support. You might recognize some of these qualities as qualities of kapha. So kapha has a tendency to be tamasic. And kapha people don't like other tamasic people, right? Kapha people love carefree, freedom, stimulation, because they themselves feel on the lethargic side. So a kapha client may be tamasic, but also be ashamed of their tamasic lack of energy. What about insufficient tamas? The idea is that without tamas, there's no way to stop action. So a person who has insufficient tamas is hyperactive. That they continue working or creating without rest. Their mind is always swirling full of thoughts, etc. So tamas in the ancient texts has a bad reputation. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Rajas is secondary and tamas is worse. Tamas is considered to be a destructive force and a negative quality. And the ancient texts say that tamas has 3 different personality types. One is a person who's brutish, or a brute force type person. And you can read in the section here the specifics on that. I'm not going to go through it too much. And then the next type of personality is a beast type person. You know, they're not painting this as very favorable, right? Barbaric, brutish, beastly, etc. Look at this. It says it has an affinity for water, but that it's cowardly and foolish and fickle. Interesting. Yeah. And then the third personality type is a creature, that they love to be static, to not move, to eat and drink, and they have no taste for pureness, righteousness, passion, or wealth. So that I think this last third point here is worth mentioning, is that the sattvic person has no taste for pureness, righteousness, passion, and wealth. All right, I want to say something else about tamas in the ancient texts, is that, and I briefly mentioned it earlier, that the 5 elements of reality are come from tamas in Sankhya's theory. And this is really problematic, because what they're saying is that tamas is this destructive, chaotic force, but also that all of reality comes from tamas. Well, then what does Sankhya think about reality? In a way, what this is saying is that reality is born from ignorance, that reality is an illusion. And this is consistent with some of the Vedic goals of escaping the cycle of birth and death, right? Getting out of creation, getting beyond creation. This idea that the created world is a defect is a hallmark of some schools of thought in Vedic spirituality. But what about you? Do you agree that existence is a defect of the mind? I think that's a challenging, pessimistic, maybe even a bit depressing viewpoint to take. And you see why Ayurveda generally takes that heterodox, the non-orthodox view of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, because, well, as Ayurveda practitioners, we love reality, we love creation, we love you know, a lot of Ayurveda practitioners are into fertility. They're not trying to escape the cycle of birth or death at all. So a very interesting, you know, little conflict here between Ayurveda, some Ayurveda practitioners, and the orthodox view of Tamas. All right, Tamas, elements and doshas. Tamas is considered to have earth element and water element, and with the corresponding gunas there. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas do not directly relate to the doshas, but Tamas is most closely associated with Kapha, and Sattva with Vata, and Rajas with Pitta. Although Rajas and Tamas, Sattva and Rajas, you know, Rajas can be very Vata-like too in its hyperactivity, and Sattva can be very Pitta-like in its clarity of perception. Well, Vata Pitta people like myself want to get out of their mind, right, and into their body. I graduated with a degree in computer software and mathematics, and I was just delighted to find Ayurveda, which was this way that I could use my mind to get into my body, right, and kind of, you know, escape the mind, like get no longer be stuck in my head. So Vata Pitta people like me need groundedness, and they need to reduce all that rajasic, rajasic tendencies, asceticism, right? So, you know, when I first started studying yoga and meditation, I was just, you know, I just loved that idea of transcendence and transcendental meditation and all that, and I really had to curb that after a while and get grounded and just come back down to earth. I needed something to calm me down and get me out of the clouds, get out of the abstract and into the meat and potatoes, or, you know, the physicality of things. So Vata Pitta people may crave that. What about how Tamas combines with some of the doshas? When Tamas is combined with Pitta, it can, you know, turn into hatred, envy, and competition. You see this in Pitta Kapha individuals, where Tamas and Rajasic come together, and that can be intense. I think that's more of like that brutish, when it's out of balance, it's more that brutish thing that the ancient texts were talking about. In Vata, Tamas looks like addictions. I think about musicians or artists and creative people, how many of them have had drug overdoses because they're just living this total inspired life, and they're so open-minded to everything that they're just experimenting and living life in the moment entirely, living life in the now, and therefore being just a bit reckless. The ancient texts talk about the soul of the tamasic person being binded to reckless behavior, and I think of that as Vata dosha and Tamas mixed together. What are some causes of pathological Tamas? It could be imbalanced Kapha, primarily imbalanced Kapha, or the use of mind-altering drugs or substances, misuse of the senses like blaring loud music, or any of the senses, right? Eating excessive amounts of food, or watching a horror movie with your eyes, right? Misusing your eyes. Any crime against wisdom. Anytime you do something that you know is harmful to you, and there's lots of examples of this. It could be anything from seeking pleasure to seeking more security or whatever, but you're doing something that is harmful to you in order to get some temporary good. That could be a crime against your own better knowing. People know they need to exercise regularly, but have a hard time including it in their lifestyle. That's tamasic. People know they should eat fresh foods and healthy foods and organic foods, but it's hard or maybe expensive, or they may want to spend their money on other things, and that could lead to tamas too. Oversleeping, a couch potato lifestyle, living in a damp, dark basement without any windows, even living in a deep valley in the forest, or in a damp place with too much shade. In a lot of these hollers in these mountains here, the sun has to come over the mountain, not just over the horizon. And so the sun might not come up until 9 a.m. in some spots, or even 10 a.m. in some certain parts in the mountains, and that could be very tamasic. Staying inside and a lack of sunlight can lead to a pale, sallow complexion. Here's an example of a room without windows here. It just feels a little tamasic. Little to no self-care habits can lead to tamasic state of mind. Poor self-hygiene. Eating late at night, overeating, lack of exercise, and not having a spiritual practice can lead to tamasic life. Eating in front of the TV, any kind of self-indulgence or immediate self-gratification. Horror movies, pornography, stimulating the sense organs without engaging in real life. Pornography takes many different forms, right? It's in its most normal form, it's looking at sexual pictures, right? But really, anytime you're stimulating the sense organs without engaging in real life, it's just there's problems. But especially, of course, in classic kind of pornography, where you're objectifying a person as well. That's using them entirely for yourself. Instead of seeing the person as the end or the goal, you're using the person as a machine or as an instrument for your own benefit. That is quite tamasic. So having no social interaction and even reckless choices can all be tamasic. Dietary foods that increase tamas. Important thing to remember here is that food not only nourishes the body, but because our mind is not just about our ideas, but it's also a physical thing. Our nervous system is a physical thing. What you eat affects your mind and affects your consciousness, affects your personality. So if you're eating highly processed foods, fast foods, foods with lots of preservatives and pesticides in them, or foods that are leftovers, heavy or very cold foods, or too much sweet taste, all of those kinds of kapha aggravating foods are also going to aggravate tamasic quality. And especially those highly processed foods are very tamasic. So typically tamasic foods create heaviness, depression, and dullness in the mind. That doesn't mean that you should avoid these foods entirely, but you have to moderate them. In moderation, some of these foods can promote groundedness and stability and can help reduce excess rajas, or the kind of vacating in sattva. Right? In sattva, when sattva is in excess, a person is a little bit transcendent. If you want to bring them back down to earth, they're going to need some of this, tamasic foods. Tamasic foods promote rest, sleepiness, and stillness. All right, so here's a list of a bunch of different foods. I'm not going to go into all their specific qualities, but avocado, fatty and oily. Wheat, heavy and sweet. And wheat also, as an herb, is designed. It makes you sleepy. It kind of grounds the heart. Mushrooms are considered tamasic. They're very earthy. They smell earthy. So sometimes I'll make saute some mushrooms and put them in some milk and with some cooked garlic, and that's a nice sleep tonic. Cooked garlic. Now, raw garlic is not tamasic. It's more rajasic. But cooked garlic is sleepy. Anything that's a sedative is... Cooked onions can be a little bit tamasic too. Pumpkin is a natural sedative. And anything that contains magnesium is going to relax your muscles. Pumpkin has tryptophan, which everybody knows that is that thing in turkey that promotes sleep. Potatoes put you right to sleep, right? You have a nice big bowl of mashed potatoes, take a nap. Peanuts, any kind of nut really is can be oily, but especially peanuts are tamasic because they're so difficult to digest. Cheese is a little tamasic, especially really funky cheeses, like blue cheese. Heavy cream is very tamasic, leading to congestion. Beef. Beef is also rajasic. It's rajasic and tamasic. Many vegetarians will lack sufficient tamas because their diet is so light. So they've got to figure out a way to introduce that earthiness if they're not eating meat. But beef is very grounding and stabilizing. And as I said, it's rajasic and tamasic. Very anabolic, increases weight. Pork, tamasic also, and rajasic, for the same reason. Turkey is not as tamasic in terms of, it's sleepy, but it's, in beef makes a person a little more stubborn. And that could be good too, to stick to your guns. I don't think stubborn is a vice. It just depends on what you're being stubborn about, right? But I think that turkey is not quite as doesn't lead to a person being as stubborn as beef or pork will. So it's not known why turkey causes sleepiness. By the way, the tryptophan myth was that turkey has more tryptophan than other meats, but then it's found that it doesn't. So there's some question about why turkey makes you sleepy. Alcohol is a depressant. It dulls the mind and reduces focus, leading to tamas, but it can also make a person angry, and that is rajasic. Herbs, any sedative herb like nutmeg or ashwagandha can increase tamas, and there's some other ones listed here. Certain antihistamines and antidepressants or blood pressure meds, anti-anxiety meds, even cancer treatments can make a person really sluggish, lethargy, and cause them to lose their sense of focus. A hypothyroid can cause you to be more tamasic, get a brain fog, and make you feel really lazy. Obesity can make you tamasic. So the excess weight makes you feel heavy, sluggish, and puffy. If I'm going too fast on any of these slides, I'm not reading everything on the slides, just hit pause and read the rest of the slide if you like. But obesity can weigh you down mentally, and can make you feel, sometimes people feel like they're, because of the media or whatever, they may feel like they ashamed if they're overweight, or have other tamasic feelings. Having lots of ama makes you very tamasic. Where you wake up feeling groggy and unclean, unable to focus, and congested. So people can be tamasic by nature, but they can also have bad habits that make them more tamasic too. Unresolved emotions can make you tamasic. If there's lingering bitterness towards a situation. All right, well, what about, how do you treat excess tamas? Well, you're going to have kapha pacifying foods and a kapha pacifying lifestyle in general. Wake up early at 6 a.m. or earlier, which is a sattvic time of day. So get out of bed earlier, eat meals at regular intervals, avoid late night eating, do stimulating physical activity. Some breath exercises can help a person be more stimulated, Kapalabhati or Bhastrika, and I'm always going to tell people, be careful with breath exercises, because it can make you really dissociated from your body. Dry brushing your skin can stimulate circulation and lymphatic flow, and can also reduce congestion and stagnation. Keep good hygiene habits. Wear clean clothes. Keep your home neat and tidy. Clean your teeth. Wash your face. Trim your nails. Scrape your tongue. Shave off that beard. Have some kind of spiritual practice every day. Make sure your food is fresh and full of prana. Make sure your food is not sitting in the fridge all week going limp. Prepare your food with care. Have a cleanse. Take a cleanse every now and then. Pomegranates, light and astringent qualities can reduce heaviness. Basmati rice is considered to be a sattvic grain. It provides energy with minimal digestive strain. A sweet potato, it's not heavy like a white potato. It won't put you to sleep. Mashed sweet potatoes are very different than mashed potatoes. They have a much lower glycemic index, and they don't cause lymphatic congestion the way white potato will. Bitters, leafy greens. Fresh-grown lettuce is full of easy-to-digest nutrients. Sprouts is an example of a food which has lots of prana. Beans and legumes, especially mung beans, which are easier to digest. Here, these are mung beans with the skin on. I recommend the ones that are yellow without the skin. They can help clean your gut, and they're not too hard to digest like other beans. Detoxify your body. Fresh milk is not considered tamasic, but it can be heavy. So fresh milk is a little bit, a little bit on the shelf with this one because it can induce tamas in a kapha person. But processed supermarket milks, especially homogenized milks, are definitely tamasic. Homemade yogurt can be good. Fish is lighter than beef, pork, and lamb, or turkey. Now, from the orthodox Vedic spirituality point of view, all meat is tamasic. But again, we're taking the more Ayurvedic view, where we're not seeking transcendence in the same way. And so there's a little bit more positive vibes towards the created world, and towards nurturing the flesh. And a lot of the ancient texts, most pages of the ancient texts have meat recommendations on them. Ayurveda is not vegetarian in this, and so I don't know if people are listening to this lecture, if you are a vegetarian or you're following that orthodox view or not. So if you're not a vegetarian, I'm just letting you know that fish is lighter and easier to digest than red meats. Adding some pungent herbs and spices can help reduce tamas and the heavy, dull sluggishness of tamas. Turmeric, for example, is great. Invigorates the blood. Stimulates circulation, improves energy. Cumin also dispels digestive sluggishness and ama and stimulates energy and alertness. Black pepper. Fenugreek. I love about fenugreek is that it's bitter and pungent. There's not too many bitter pungents. Arugula is like that too. But fenugreek, a great spice for reducing tamas. Some herbs like your digestive stimulants, trichatu, bitter orange peel, black pepper, and ginger. And also CCFT, let's not overlook that. It has some nice diuretic qualities too. Brahmi is a stimulating nervine and nerve tonic that lifts the mind and improves mental performance, concentration, and alertness. Tulsi is considered by the Vedic text to be a sacred herb because of its ability to bring the energy up into the mind. Now, a Vata person takes Tulsi, they might be spaced out. So you got to be careful with Tulsi. But if you're very tamasic, Tulsi can help. Jasmine as an herb is useful in heavy type depression. Your cleansing herbs, laxatives, diuretics, your fat scraping lekana herbs, and cardiac stimulants like pipali and ginger. All of those can help reduce tamas. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this lecture about tamas. I hope you enjoyed it.